By the time Lady Seraphina Vale entered the drawing-room, the laughter had already begun. She knew at once that it was about her. Her cousin, Cressida Harrow, stood beside the marble fireplace in a gown of pale blue silk, surrounded by young ladies who had spent the evening pretending to admire one another. Cressida's smile sharpened when Seraphina approached. "There she is," she said. "The bride no man has managed to claim." A few guests lowered their eyes. Seraphina kept walking. She had learned that humiliation only became unbearable when one allowed the humiliator to see it. Cressida lifted her glass. "Tell us, Seraphina, have you finally found a gentleman willing to overlook your temper?" "No," Seraphina replied calmly. "But I have found several willing to overlook yours." Silence fell. Someone coughed to hide a laugh. Cressida's expression hardened. She stepped closer. "You always were arrogant for a woman with nothing to offer." Seraphina's fingers tightened around the small velvet purse at her waist. Her father's estate had been declared nearly bankrupt after his death, leaving her dependent upon relatives who reminded her of that fact whenever kindness became inconvenient. Yet she knew something they did not. 3 nights earlier, she had discovered ledgers hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her father's study. Money had vanished from the estate for years. Hundreds of pounds had been transferred to accounts bearing the name of Cressida's father. She had copied the figures. She had hidden the evidence. And tonight, she intended to leave before they discovered what she knew. Cressida leaned close enough for only Seraphina to hear. "You should be grateful we allow you to remain beneath this roof." Seraphina looked into her cousin's eyes. "You should be grateful I have not yet shown anyone those ledgers." For the first time that evening, Cressida went pale. Seraphina turned away. She did not see the man standing in the shadowed doorway. Duke Rowan Ashcombe had arrived without announcement, his black riding coat still wet from the rain. He had heard only the final exchange, but he had noticed what others had missed: the fear behind Cressida's anger and the composure hiding Seraphina's exhaustion. Before he could approach, Seraphina slipped from the room. She climbed the servants' staircase, changed into a plain traveling cloak, and took the back road toward the neighboring village. She made it less than 2 miles. Her carriage was forced off the road when a tree crashed across the lane. The horses reared. The carriage overturned. Seraphina struck the ground hard enough to lose her breath. When she opened her eyes, rain was pouring through the broken carriage window. Then she heard footsteps. She froze. A man's voice came through the darkness. "Lady Seraphina?" She reached for the small pistol hidden beneath her cloak. The footsteps stopped. "Put it away," the stranger said quietly. "If I meant you harm, I would not have announced myself." Lightning illuminated his face. It was the Duke. Rowan looked from her frightened expression to the overturned carriage. Then he saw the blood on her sleeve. His voice changed. "Who did this to you?" Seraphina stared at him, uncertain whether she had finally found help or another danger. Then, from somewhere beyond the trees, came the sound of approaching horses. Rowan heard it too. His expression hardened. "Get behind me," he ordered. Seraphina did not move. The Duke stepped closer. "Those men are not looking for your carriage," he said. "They are looking for you." The storm had swallowed the road by the time Duke Rowan Ashcombe reached the overturned carriage. Rain lashed his face, but he barely noticed it. His attention remained fixed on the woman standing beside the wreckage, one hand pressed against her bleeding arm and the other gripping a pistol. Lady Seraphina Vale. He had seen her earlier that evening across a crowded drawing-room. She had been surrounded by laughter that was not kind, yet she had endured it without lowering her head. Now she looked nothing like the composed woman he remembered. Her dark hair clung to her cheeks, her traveling cloak was torn, and fear sharpened her eyes. "Those men are not looking for your carriage," Rowan said. "They are looking for you." Seraphina glanced toward the distant hoofbeats. "Then you had better leave." He almost smiled. "You have mistaken me for a sensible man." The riders appeared between the trees. Rowan seized Seraphina's hand and pulled her behind the carriage just as a gunshot cracked through the storm. A bullet struck the wooden wheel. Seraphina flinched. Rowan drew his pistol. "Stay here." "No." He looked at her. "I have spent my entire life being told to stay where other people put me," she whispered. "I am finished obeying." Something in her answer changed his expression. "Then keep close." They fled through the forest on foot, using the storm as their cover. Rowan led her toward an old hunting lodge hidden beyond the ridge, but Seraphina stumbled before they reached it. He caught her. "I can walk." "You are bleeding." "So are you." Only then did Rowan notice blood soaking through his sleeve. He ignored it. Inside the lodge, he built a fire while Seraphina sat rigidly near the hearth. When he returned with bandages, she tried to treat her own wound. "You are shaking," he said. "I am cold." "You are frightened." She met his gaze. "Yes." It was the first honest answer she had given him. Rowan knelt and carefully wrapped her arm. His hands were surprisingly gentle for a man whose reputation suggested otherwise. "Who is hunting you?" "My family." His expression hardened. Seraphina told him about the stolen money, the forged accounts, and the ledgers she had discovered. She expected disbelief. Instead, Rowan asked, "Where are the originals?" "Hidden." "Where?" She hesitated. "Somewhere they will never find them." A faint smile touched his mouth. "Good." The next morning, Rowan rode to the nearest village for a physician. When he returned, he found Seraphina asleep beside the fire with his coat around her shoulders. He quietly removed his gloves. The woman who had threatened him with a pistol in the rain now looked painfully young. For reasons he did not understand, he wanted to protect her. Not because she was helpless. Because she had refused to become helpless. By afternoon, however, a messenger arrived at the lodge carrying a sealed letter from Seraphina's family. Rowan opened it only after she gave permission. His face changed as he read. Seraphina took the letter from his hand. There was only one sentence. "Come home, or the solicitor dies." Her blood turned cold. Rowan reached for his coat. "We leave at once." She stared at him. "You are coming with me?" He fastened his sword belt. "No." He looked toward the storm-darkened mountains. "I am taking you back." The horses had barely begun climbing the mountain road when the first gunshot shattered the storm. Seraphina ducked instinctively as Rowan pulled her behind a stone wall. Another shot struck the rocks above them, sending fragments against her cheek. "Stay down." "I am tired of being told that." "Then stay alive out of spite." Despite the danger, a startled laugh escaped her. Rowan glanced at her, surprised. It was the first time he had seen her smile. The riders abandoned the chase when the storm became too violent, but Rowan knew they would return. He took Seraphina through a narrow forest path to his ancestral estate, keeping her mounted before him whenever the ground became too treacherous. By dawn, they reached Ashcombe Hall. Seraphina expected grandeur. Instead, she found quiet. The Duke's home was imposing but strangely lonely, filled with locked rooms and covered furniture. Rowan dismissed every servant except the housekeeper, then ordered the gates closed. "You are safe here," he told her. Seraphina studied him. "You barely know me." "I know enough." "What do you know?" "That you were threatened in your own home. That someone tried to kill you on the road. And that you protected evidence capable of ruining powerful people rather than surrendering it to save yourself." His gaze softened. "That tells me more than an introduction could." For the first time, Seraphina allowed herself to believe him. Days passed while the physician treated her injuries. Rowan never demanded the ledgers, though he knew they could expose the conspiracy. Instead, he gave her a locked study and told her she could examine every account in his possession. His kindness unsettled her more than cruelty ever had. She had learned how to survive insults. She did not know how to accept tenderness. One evening, she found Rowan asleep beside the library fireplace, still holding a report about her father's estate. She quietly placed a blanket over him. His eyes opened. "You should be resting." "So should you." "I was working." "You were snoring." His eyebrow lifted. I do not snore. You do when you are worried. He stared at her for a long moment. Then I suppose I have been worried. Their closeness grew in the spaces between danger. He taught her to ride his strongest mare. She challenged his gloomy silence. He discovered that she loved old maps. She discovered that he secretly rescued injured animals from the surrounding villages. Then the past returned. A carriage arrived carrying Cressida. She entered the hall wearing mourning black and claimed Seraphina had murdered her own father for his inheritance. She produced letters bearing Seraphina's name. The servants whispered. Seraphina's confidence faltered. Rowan remained beside her. You forged those. Cressida smiled. You cannot prove it. Before Rowan could answer, Seraphina remembered something. The letters contained a phrase her father had never used. She knew who had written them. Her cousin. Seraphina rushed to the library and opened the hidden compartment beneath her father's ledger. The original documents were gone. Only one object remained. A blood-stained cufflink belonging to Cressida's father. Then the library doors slammed shut. Smoke began creeping beneath them. Cressida had set the house archives on fire. Seraphina turned toward Rowan. The Duke was already reaching for the door. But the flames exploded across the corridor before he could open it. And somewhere beyond the smoke, Cressida screamed. Let them burn together. Rowan seized Seraphina's hand. Neither knew whether they would escape. But neither was willing to let go. The fire had already reached the library ceiling when Rowan kicked open the nearest window. Go. Seraphina refused to move. The evidence is inside. The evidence is not worth your life. It is if it proves my father was murdered. Rowan seized a heavy curtain and wrapped it around his arm before forcing his way through the flames. Seraphina followed, coughing as smoke filled her lungs. The hidden compartment had begun to burn. Rowan overturned the desk and dragged the scorched ledger from beneath it, but a beam crashed between them and the door. Rowan! He turned. For the first time, she saw genuine fear on his face. Not for himself. For her. He crossed the burning room, lifted her over the fallen timber, and carried her through the smoke. They reached the courtyard moments before the library windows exploded outward. Cressida was waiting near the gates. She expected to see two frightened survivors. Instead, Rowan emerged carrying Seraphina in his arms. You failed, he said. Cressida's smile vanished. The Duke placed Seraphina gently on her feet and walked toward his cousin's accuser. You forged the letters. Your father stole the money. And you attempted to destroy the evidence. Cressida laughed nervously. You have no proof. Seraphina stepped forward. She held up the scorched ledger. Perhaps not enough for a court. She opened it. But enough to tell us where your father kept the remaining records. Cressida's face drained of color. Rowan had already sent riders to the neighboring estate. By morning, the missing account books were recovered. The truth became impossible to bury. Cressida's father was arrested for fraud, while Cressida confessed that she had arranged the attack on Seraphina's carriage because she feared the ledgers would expose them. Yet Seraphina received one final surprise. The solicitor revealed that her father had known his relatives were stealing from him. Before his death, he had secretly transferred his remaining fortune into a trust for Seraphina. She was not penniless. She had never been powerless. Her family had simply spent years convincing her that she was. Rowan did not ask her to marry him. Instead, he told her she was free to leave Ashcombe Hall whenever she wished. Seraphina stayed. Not because she needed protection. Because she loved him. Months later, she reopened her father's estate as a school and refuge for women who had nowhere else to go. Rowan supported every decision without trying to control it. Their wedding was held in the small chapel where he had first found her during the storm. There were no grand speeches. Only Rowan taking her hand and saying, I do not want a wife who obeys me. Seraphina smiled. Good. You would have chosen the wrong woman. I know. After the ceremony, they returned to Ashcombe Hall. Cressida's cruel words had once haunted Seraphina. Now they made her smile. No gentleman would marry you, Cressida had said. Seraphina looked at Rowan. Your cousin was wrong. He kissed her forehead. Painfully. Then Seraphina noticed something unexpected on the dining table. A small brass key. Rowan placed his hand over it. It opens the west wing. She stared at him. Why? Because I thought you should have a place that belongs entirely to you. She opened the doors the next morning. Inside was not a ballroom or a private suite. It was a library, a classroom, and a refuge filled with books, desks, warm fireplaces, and beds for women fleeing cruel homes. Seraphina turned to Rowan. You built this. No. He smiled. You built it. I merely stopped anyone from preventing you. Outside, snow began falling softly over the estate. For years, Seraphina had believed happiness meant finally being chosen. Now she understood something better. Happiness was choosing herself, and finding a man who loved her enough to let her remain free. And when Rowan reached for her hand, she took it without hesitation.